Reporting Services is web-based in that after you create a report on your client machine, you publish it to a web server. Once you publish the report to a web server, Reporting Services provides tools for viewing and managing the published report, including tools for creating ad hoc reports. In addition, Reporting Services supports many different reporting formats, such as HTML, PDF, TIFF, Microsoft Excel, CSV, and others. But how can Reporting Services fit into your organization? Exactly when would you want to use it? Well, suppose that your organization has a database that stores information about customers and their orders, and various people need to get at that information to understand trends within the marketplace. One approach would be to train users to write and execute SQL statements to pull the data themselves, which of course could be quite costly, time-consuming, and very prone to errors. A better approach would be to use Reporting Services to create and publish a set of static reports that users can simply view to get the information they need. No need for them to learn or understand SQL. Reporting Services provides all the tools that you need to effectively meet the requirements of the users within an organization. Reporting Services also provides a rich API that you can use to modify how reports are created, processed, and managed. One of the biggest reasons why organizations use Reporting Services is to provide users with reports that are centrally developed and managed. This helps get away from the mishmash of reports that used to be available from various unrelated applications, which, all too often, didn't provide the information users needed in a form that they could work with. At the same time, Reporting Services provides the tools that authorized users can use to produce ad hoc reports that let them explore data in ways that assists with their specific needs. This also gives users access to information if the report developers have a backlog and can't get to a specific request for a while. SQL Server Reporting Services supports two different installation and operating options, both of which are based on the core Reporting Services engine. The first is native mode. In this case, the report server controls all report execution, rendering, and management. In this mode, all Reporting Services components are tightly bound to the core database engine, either on the local or a remote machine. And then there's SharePoint integrated mode. In this case, the report server runs as part of a SharePoint server farm. SharePoint provides front-end access to content management security. The report server then takes care of report execution and rendering the final reports. This course is based on the native mode of Reporting Services. SharePoint integrated mode is quite a bit more complex to install and configure, since it's based on two major interacting server software products. Nevertheless, there are some reasons to consider making the integration with SharePoint. SharePoint integrated mode makes the most sense when your organization has made a strong investment in SharePoint and you want to leverage that investment when creating, executing, and managing reports. A number of Reporting Services features are only available when working in SharePoint integrated mode. So when in integrated mode, you can do things like manage reports, data sources, and report history using SharePoint. Reporting Services itself in native mode has various tools that you can use to do the same thing, but in SharePoint integrated mode, it's all happening within SharePoint. You can also use the document management and collaboration features of SharePoint with reports. You can also make use of SharePoint managed authentication and authorization for reports, and this includes the use of forms authentication. You can also distribute reports outside of a firewall using SharePoint. You can deliver reports using a SharePoint delivery extension. And you can also create custom integrations between a SharePoint site and Reporting Services using the Reporting Services Web Services API. In short, using SharePoint integrated mode greatly boosts the collaboration features of reports that you create. On the other hand, there are a number of Reporting Services features that are not supported when the report server is configured for this mode. Books Online has all the details, so you'll want to carefully consider whether using SharePoint integrated mode is worth the additional effort to install, configure, and maintain the additional benefits. There are two approaches to installing and configuring Reporting Services. One is to install it at the same time you install the core database features of SQL Server. This approach involves selecting reporting services as an additional component to install during the normal installation process. The second approach is to install reporting services after you install SQL Server. With this approach, you run the SQL Server installation program and then choose to add the reporting services features. Each of these approaches configures reporting services to varying degrees, depending on the options that you select during installation. But no matter how you do it, once the installation is complete, you'll want to review all of the configuration options and fine-tune your setup by using the Reporting Services Configuration Manager. You can revisit and modify the settings at any time as you learn how to best use reporting services. Although, changing settings will affect various behaviors of your reporting environment. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is show you the Reporting Services Configuration Manager, so you can see what options are available for configuring your instance of the report server. So I'll go down here to the Start menu, All Programs, Microsoft SQL Server 2012, Configuration Tools, and the Reporting Services Configuration Manager. And it'll be in pretty much the same location for SQL Server 2014. So I'll start that up. And then I need to connect to a server. So in this case, I'm going to connect to my local machine. It happens to be called Win7Dev. And I can select the instance of report server that I want to connect to. In this case, MS SQL Server. But it's the only instance that's installed in this machine, so it's the only option. Alright, you can of course connect to remote servers as well, as long as you have the ability to log in and the permissions to work with reporting services. So I'll go ahead and click on Connect. So once you successfully connect, here's the main user interface for the Configuration Manager. So the left menu groups together the configuration options into various functional areas, and I'll be looking at several of these. And then the main top level option here, that's what's selected when you first start the tool. And it shows things like the server status, as well as the instance name and so forth. And if you want to, you can stop the reporting services here, or start them if they are stopped. One thing you want to look at is the web service URL options here. This lets you configure the virtual directory that you'll use, including to select an SSL certificate to use to encrypt communications with the server if you elect to do that. Okay, so I'm going to leave all the defaults. Report server is going to be the virtual directory, but you can name it any valid virtual directory name. You can use all assigned or select individual IP addresses, select a different IP port, and here's where you can select an SSL certificate as well as set the port. And then there's some advanced options as well. Once you've made all your selections, you can click on the Apply button, and that goes out and creates that virtual directory for you. And as you can see, it's creating the virtual directory report server, and then it tells you that if there's any problems or that it was successfully created. Alright, so notice that we have only green balls. The yellow caution indicator has gone away, and the report server web service URLs become active links right here. So this is the URL that you'll use in order to access the reporting services using the web services. And I'll talk about that more in other parts of the course. Alright, so that's one thing that you need to do when you first configure reporting services. The next thing is to go into Database here. So this opens up the Report Server Database page, which initially doesn't have a database configured. So what you need to do is click on the Change Database button in order to select the database that you want to use. So this opens up this Report Server Database Configuration Wizard, and that's going to step you through the process. So in this case, I want to create a new report server database, but if I had an existing one, I could select that, and I'll click on Next. And here I can select the server that I want to use, and provide the authentication information for the SQL Server instance, where the wizard's going to create the database. Usually the defaults are fine here, but you may have to change the authentication information. So I can go in and click on Test Connection, succeeded, so we're good. And so I'm using integrated security here because I have permissions in order to access that instance of SQL Server. But if I didn't, I could change that and provide a username and password. All right, all good to go, so I'll click on Next. All right, so this gives the Change Database page. I'm going to again accept the defaults, but you can give it a custom name. This is the name of the database where it's going to store different report artifacts. So again, the default is Report Server. It also is going to create a temporary database that's used in conjunction with executing reports. And then I can also set the native language. All right, like I said, I'm going to accept the defaults and move on. Then on the credentials page, you can opt to use a report server service, Windows or SQL Server credentials in order to connect to the database. The service credentials are normally the best option. So I'm just going to accept that as the default, but you can see there's other options there, and I can also provide a username and password, but I'll use the service credentials. And then here's the summary page. So here's where you should check your selections, and then click on Next in order to create the database. Okay, you can see that it progresses through all the steps necessary to create those databases on that instance of SQL Server. And there you can see all of the steps finished successfully. If anything went wrong, it would have provided some error information, some basic information, so I can go back in and fix whatever the problem is. Okay, so once it's done, I'll click on the Finish button, and now we've configured the report database within the instance of SQL Server. All right, another thing that you'll want to do for a new instance of reporting services is come here to the Report Manager URL. Okay, notice once again we have this yellow caution sign, which means that we haven't configured anything yet. So what you're going to do here is configure the virtual directory that you'll use to manage reports. So this is going to set up the report manager that you can use to add reports, create reports, execute reports, set security, do all kinds of different things. All right, so once again, all the defaults here are fine. I'm going to click on Apply. It goes through the steps of creating them. The yellow caution symbol goes away, and now we have this URL, which is where we'll go to access Report Manager. All right, so I can go ahead and click on that link, and it'll go ahead and connect to Report Manager. Report Manager has started up, and I have the interface. As you can see, this is a new instance of reporting services, so I don't have any reports or other items within Report Manager. Now, a couple of things may have happened here when you connected to Report Manager, when clicking that link within the Configuration Manager. You may have been prompted for credentials, and that depends on how you configured access to Report Manager and within reporting services. So in that case, just enter the credentials that are necessary to access the instance of SQL Server and reporting services, and you should get Report Manager. But one other problem that might arise is that you may get a message that indicates that the user does not have required permissions. If you're sure that you've configured reporting services correctly, particularly in terms of security, then you'll need to run your browser with administrative rights. This can be a particular issue in Windows Vista, Windows 7, and Windows Server 2008 and later. In that case, just close the browser, restart it by right-clicking and select Run as Administrator, and that should take care of the problem. You may also have to add both the localhost and machine name domains to the list of trusted sites in Internet Explorer, as well as lower the security level for the trusted zone to low in order to run reports locally. Now, hopefully you're not going to be faced with that because it's kind of loosening security on your local machine, but it's just an indication that reporting services has sometimes some kind of funky security requirement. But if you do need to do all that, it also unfortunately means that you can't directly click the link, as I did within Configuration Manager, on the Report Manager URL page. Okay, so just thank Microsoft for less than optimal security design. And they've documented the issues in various places within Books Online. As well as there are a couple of connect issues that people have reported and requested to clean that up. Okay. But anyway, hopefully you won't have that problem, as I didn't here, fortunately, on this machine, but you may, and so you have now some idea of what you need to do to get around those kinds of problems.